This came at the request of the NCBFAA Customs Committee and other members of the NCBFAA as they started to learn more about what CBP has programmed for what we used to call simplified entry, but is now ACE release. And we want to make sure that all of our members and anybody else on the call understands the new functionality that CBP is offering us to release cargo. And who better to give this presentation to us than Stephen Lubel, who is the branch chief of cargo release at CBP. And Stephen, without taking up any more time, I would love to turn this over to you because I know that this is a packed session and there's a lot that we need to tell our listeners. I also want to inform people that if we don't get to all your questions and we can't answer them all on the webinar, we will try to get answers to you afterwards, but we'll do our best not to leave you guessing. So Stephen, take it away.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. We're doing a lot of very, very swift but effective work at CBP to take us into the next generation. When I say that, we've got a system, ACS, a number of legacy systems that are real workhorses. They rarely fail. They do the job very well. But as we've moved along, the world has changed. Other agency requirements have changed. Trading has changed. So we need to change with it to be able to absorb more information more quickly. To do that, as most of you are aware about the ACE program itself, is to modernize and automate, bring it to one platform, bring all the systems to one bucket. You've heard about the International Trade Data System, the single window for the other agencies. Well, to start with, we've got to get all of our cargo release, entry summary, all the programs in one place so that we can interact with these other systems, or should I say, they can interact with us. So today's session is going to be about, sorry about that, is going to be a cargo release itself. That's your basic, let me have the cargo into my possession, commercial admissibility. This takes your legacy entry, 3461, into a new transaction, mostly the same information, but processed in new and different ways, which we'll go over. But taking that simplified entry pilot had a couple of very specific changes from what we did today and we've done for the last 25 or 30 years. One is have the importer, the broker, provide information about the merchandise, information about the commercial transaction itself, and instead of requiring the broker to be responsible to match it up with the carrier that it came in on, the correct manifest, that bill of lading or house bill of lading is the key that matches it right back to an active manifest, and we let the carrier, who's already required legally, let CBP know when the merchandise arrives, where it came from, when it's unladen. Let the carrier tell us that, which they do. So combining those two pieces of information, we've got more flexibility with the entry. We have more flexibility when things change with the conveyance. It is a new transaction. It's a different set. The most significant change is there's some parties that you give us name and address for, like the manufacturer, instead of an active MID algorithm. Let's dig into this and see what we've done so far. We started with deployment A, which was air, basic and advanced for deployment B. The difference between those two is deployment A and basic is vanilla. Full bill of lading is how it started, air shipments, direct import into the city of the port of entry. There were no PGA flags on any tariff number whatsoever, no split shipments, no partials, no inbonds, making sure that the process worked. And that process is similar to what you already have today. You submit the information, our targeting systems, and various user-defined rules and business rules about admissibility all run about the entry. And then, magically, one important thing, there is no paper involved. There's no paper form. And we're pushing ahead that even when we request documentation from the trade, it should be submitted by a scanned image or some sort of electronic file through our document image system that we'll discuss in a little bit. Advanced for a certain mode of transportation would include split shipments and inbonds and partials, and that would be subsequent inbonds, could take 3 trips before it makes an entry. We still are not quite ready for all PGA merchandise yet. So we took basic air and then we expanded it and said, oh, you can use inbonds, so you can make an entry on a partial which is less than the full bill of lading quantity. The bill of lading is for 100 pieces. You can make that entry for 67 pieces, and perhaps a second entry, perhaps another could be made by inbond or some other disposition. So we didn't just roll this out by mode of transportation for convenience. Today there is an air manifest system, which meant that we had to connect our entry system in ACE to the air manifest system at the same time in the same way our current legacy entry from ACS is associated and connected, both for incoming information from the manifest and for posting releases back to the manifest. Ocean and rail, as you should be aware, that Ocean AMS has been sunsetted, replaced by a system called M1. So that's a second system that we had to connect to specifically, mimicking and enhancing the way entry is connected today. And then we have truck, which again is a separate manifest system. The truck manifest system at this very moment is being rolled into the M1 system. And air is being developed, a brand new air manifest system, which will also be integrated into M1, making it much easier on the CBP personnel to look in one place with similar screens rather than green screens, a legacy system, new screens, M1, truck manifests that you've heard about in the last 6-7 years. But as we deploy each mode, we have basic and we have advanced for the same reasons. And as we go forward talking about splits, inbonds, and partials, you'll see some of the magic we've come up with, necessitating careful rollout and very, very detailed testing. So far, we're starting with the consumption in informal entries, 01 and 11, similar to what started with ACE entry summary. And we get more complex. We'll see these scenarios we'll discuss. Cancellations and corrections, which we'll discuss, are all by EDI, electronically, taking away the need for that courier and the hard copy letter requesting a cancellation or a pending change. We have new and better ways to use the same transaction to submit your correction or cancellation request within certain rules. Everybody wins because CBP has better information, and you'll see some of the business rules we've engaged to weed out typos and other types of mistakes that create a turnaround, oh, I don't have this, reject back, go back again, saves everyone time and money. Some of the documents that are important to this presentation and important to proceeding forward are the CAT-AIR chapter, which we refer to mostly as implementation guides. For the SE transaction is the ACE entry, or ACE cargo release, formally simplified entry. It is posted on the web. I'm sure most of you know that the cbp.gov had some reshuffling and a brand new look. So I've put in here the latest hyperlink to get you directly there. ACE ABI batch and control. This is an ACE transaction versus an ACS transaction. Batch and controls are the headers and footers. Simply put, the return addresses so the CBP knows exactly who sent it and how to route back the answers. The ACS headers and batch and controls were more extensive. ACE is straighter and to the point, so you'll need to make sure that when you're handling ACE transactions that you're using the right block controls. What's not currently posted, which I did provide to NCBFAA, is the status notification chapter. We'll try to get that reposted, which is exactly what it says, the responses, not just your entry's been accepted, but different dispositions from admissible to release suspended, and everything in between. And something that you haven't seen in days past, we actually give you the input validation rules so that you don't have to figure out what they are yourself in the CAT-AIR chapter. We lay it out for you that if you don't have a good import of record number or a good country of origin, here's the error you're going to get and the response that you should see. Split shipments. Split shipments for air. There's been some misunderstanding about what split shipment is, and the definition is here in front of you. The carrier, for their own convenience, split a shipment that you, the importer, believed was coming on one bill of lading on one conveyance. Many reasons, everything from fuel to weight to room. They left 2 pallets on the tarmac. They couldn't handle 350 rolls. And normally the importer finds this out with the broker 48 hours after it arrives, when they send the trucker to pick up the whole shipment, believing they have a release. And the trucker calls up and says, only 70 of the 100 boxes are here. They won't let me have them. What do you want to do? That is something that breakdown in communication happens more often. It's not written by the airline on the paperwork. No one's notified the broker. But the importer, by regulations and statute, has the right to still file a single entry even though it arrived on multiple conveyances in this instance. So if that's the importer's choice, what can happen? You've got some options which are brand new. You can ask for hold all, meaning as soon as you know that there's a split, you can say, CBP, do not issue me a release. Don't start my 10-day clock until it's all here. Then there's incremental release under immediate delivery procedures. Yes, that's correct. Specific regulations under immediate delivery procedures for split shipments say that CBP may grant this within certain conditions for all parts of the shipment that arrive within 10 days of the first part of the shipment. So if you elect this, CBP may release the first 20 boxes for Part A of the shipment. Part B comes in, you get 10 more boxes. Part C comes in, you get 20 more boxes. And if Part D is wheels up and ready for release before the 10th day, before the 11th day, then you will get release. This sounds wonderful, and it gets better. Because you all know that as soon as you find out it's split, you get on the phone, you start calling the airline, trying to dig out what are all the details of all the parts of the shipment so that you can put it on a sheet of paper so you can fax or send a courier over to CBP to have them properly post each part of the entry to each part of the manifest that came in. And it's no easier for CBP. CBP actually has to do at least 4 steps for a shipment that's split only once, meaning 2 parts. So CBP spends a lot of time taking care of this. What we've upgraded is, as soon as the carrier notifies CBP on the manifest, wheels up, sometimes before, sometimes wheels up, and sometimes after, CBP will search the system for entries for that bill, and as the filer, they will notify you immediately in a response message, disposition message, that this shipment has been split, and here's all the details of Part A, and if Part B is already manifested, we'll tell you about Part B, and so on and so forth until all the parts of the shipment are there. CBP system can also monitor and add up the different parts of the shipment until all of the manifested bill has been wheels up, and will immediately send a release to all parts of the shipment. When there's incremental release, The messaging to the carrier will be very specific. These 20 boxes that came in on Part A of the shipment are released by customs to the importer, telling the carrier there is no misunderstanding. If the carrier is satisfied, money and otherwise, CBP is not holding those first 20 boxes and to let it go. And the automated posting to the manifest system means no more having to send that courier over to CBP asking for posting. And it frees up the officers and entry specialists to do work on things that are unsolvable and more difficult.
And Stephen, can I just say before you go on that I hope everybody who's listening can really realize what a significant change in processing this brings us, and an improvement too, in the sense that first of all we now have a choice to hold all the cargo or release it incrementally for splits. That's something that we really didn't have in the same way that we do now, and that CBP is keeping track of the quantity as it's being released. And we just didn't have that in an automated way, and we do now. And as most people know, with air shipments, splits are not unusual. They happen a lot. So when you say it's going to free up CBP officials, I also think that it's going to be a benefit to our members.
Most definitely. I'm always looking out as a licensed broker formerly practicing. What's good for the trade is good for CBP. Freeing up time from troubleshooting by letting the data speak to itself and correct itself. Here's a flow talking about exactly what possibly can happen. You've got some great choices that you didn't have before, including the opportunity to cancel an entry for the reason that it was split. You can see from the left, it starts in. The filer gets notification that it was split. What are your options? You can cancel the entry for whatever reason. 1,000 commercial reasons come up. You can ask CBP to hold all cargo, meaning, most importantly, they do not actually issue the release. They don't give you a release date. That means that 10-day clock isn't starting. But automatically, if the 10 days goes by and all parts are available, done. If day 11 comes in, you'll get a message back that Part D of the shipment, while manifested, is not eligible for release on this entry and must be made on a separate entry. That's all by regulation, and we provided in the transaction set where normally you don't have to provide the shipment detail of flight and date. In this case, for that separate shipment you would, and there's a separate record for it, and we provided you all the information including the boarded quantity as well as the manifested quantity of the bill. Update the SE, which is the ACE entry, with a partial entry. Okay, 20 boxes came in, you're going to make entry on 20. Well, you're still not going to get any of the shipment, but your clock starts ticking and perhaps you sold the shipment to someone else for a different entry. Incremental release under immediate delivery procedures. It's as simple as clicking a little box as an indicator when you transmit in. If it is granted, CBP lets you know that and starts releasing the shipments as they become eligible, meaning wheels up for each subsequent part. If it's not granted, and it may not be granted because it's quota merchandise, and there may be other situations, you go right back to what do you want to do. You have these other options. See how fast this one moves. Runaway mouse. Air shipments, and here it is. Those interested and familiar with the ACE entry summary, with census warnings, you have the ability to tell CBP up front that you know it's going to get a census warning, and you can proactively send it, or you can wait till you get a census warning and then respond to it. The same happens with split shipments. You're not required to send an indication, but many people so far do. They say if it comes up and it is split, please hold all. And they send the code in advance so CBP doesn't have to come back and ask you what you would like to do. So big question that comes up is, what's the default if you choose nothing? Thinking about this, here's the scenario. The shipment is due to come in Friday evening. Entry's been made on Friday because it's wheels up. Everybody goes home. CBP gets notice that the shipment is split, and only Part A is coming in. That's the only thing manifested. A notice goes out to the broker who's home, warm, snug in the bed, hot chocolate, reading a book. And by Saturday night, Sunday night, the other parts of the shipment have arrived or are wheels up. And CBP then, if it's eligible, goes ahead and releases the shipment if there were no holds. So that would be the default. If there's no action taken, no release will happen until all parts of the shipment have arrived. Here's another working model of this. The trade files, the carrier files a manifest. If it's not a split shipment, everything goes and is on the what we call the happy path. If it is a split shipment, we take a look and see if the filer has given instructions yet for hold all or split, or decided to cancel the entry. If they have not provided any choice, we refer the filer back to, please give us the choice. It is not being released due to waiting your instructions. And if they have provided instructions, we'll follow along with that. If it's incremental release, then each time part of the shipment comes in, it will be released. If it's not, because it's hold all, it'll wait till it all arrives. Back to cargo is released. Inbonds. We're going to wait a little bit to take some questions. I know they'll build up. Inbonds. This is some magic that we've all been waiting for a long time. You make entry, and sometimes you don't know that there's an inbond, and even if so, you don't know the inbond number. This is very common. You expect a flight to come in directly to Philadelphia, and the next thing you know, it has routed into Chicago and then inbonded back to Philadelphia. Well, with ACE Entry, you can file, pre-file, weeks in advance of actually manifesting the entry. If you haven't heard this presentation before, that means as long as you have a bill number and you know what carrier it's going to come on, you can file the entry. CBP will start processing selectivity and targeting. If they have a question, they may ask for a document. And our system is looking out for as soon as that bill number appears on a manifest. And once there is a bill match, more things start to happen. But of course, if you've done that, you have no idea an inbond's coming. If an entry is filed with an inbond number because you do know the information, you're going to have to declare a port of entry. And you're thinking right now, don't you always have to report that? Actually, in ACE Entry, you can leave the port of entry blank, undeclared, and have it derived from the port of unlading of the bill of lading. And if an inbond is involved, we will automatically roll that port of entry to the inbond destination for that inbond. If an entry is filed without an inbond number and there is an inbond on file for the listed entry, we have some more magic to happen. We actually go and seek out all inbonds associated with that bill number. And if we find one, we automatically return that information to the filer in the message you see below, which is called the SO, which is similar to the RR today disposition message. And I don't know, Amy, can you see my mouse as well?
I can see it.
Great. So what we have here is we have this bill number, we have this entry number. This is going back to this filer SSH, and in record 42 we actually tell you, here is the inbound number. It's a type 62 from port 0901 to 1901, and it was initiated on February 21st for 20 pieces. So that's something that you've had to seek out yourself before, and we automatically tell you. So you have this information for your entry summary, and we look with smart logic from the port of unlading all the way to the port of entry for this bill of lading. So let me back up there. If you file an entry for Chicago and the inbond associated with it is taking it to Dallas, we'll process the entry. We'll send you a message that we can't issue a release because it's either Chicago or Dallas, but there's no permission for that cargo to get to Chicago. And it may be there's a subsequent inbond going to be cut. It could be a mistake where the entry should have been made in Dallas. It could be a mistake where the inbond is going to be corrected for a destination Chicago. And the system will be on the lookout for this. And you see it shows the bill has arrived at the port of unlading, and in this case it's already issued a release. So this takes a lot of the troubles, a lot of the do I get the right information out of your hands. You can still query this information, but we're passing along to you, the filer, the information that the carrier or the bonded carrier is posted, which is supposed to be the best that there is. But we've also made some other innovations. So we'll get back to those in a few minutes, and we'll go with corrections and cancellations. We've got some nice flow charts.
Stephen, before you go to corrections and cancellations, can I just ask you one question?
Of course.
What happens if you set up the entry, let's say, to go to Chicago, and for some reason it ends up in Atlanta? Is it going to be, can a port code change be done under the ACE release process, or do we have to cancel the release information that we filed and do a new release? Is that something that you could explain to us a little bit?
Certainly, certainly. This is most unusual, but it takes us, you're not used to it at least, takes us to a new national level. If you file in Chicago, and for whatever reason the flight took it directly into Atlanta, and you've decided to clear it in Atlanta, you can actually change the port of entry. But doing that, know that each time something changes, each time something's added, we run it back through targeting and selectivity again. And when I say these things, I'm speaking only for CBP. We can't speak for the other government agencies. There are some that are particular about their decision-making, port for port, that may wish for a new entry to be filed. We're still negotiating that with the other agencies to see how they'd like to handle this. But if no other government agencies are involved, and let's take it a step further, it was filed for Chicago in error and the filer didn't have a permit for Chicago, you won't get a release in Chicago. You'll get that message, and you can update the entry with a full replace to take that to Atlanta. And corrections and cancellations will cover this in just a moment.
Okay, so then it looks like there will be some functionality for the port code change, particularly if there are not other government agencies involved. And we did have, somebody else was asking how all these messages are going to be coming to us through, you know, the incremental releases and the inbound information. And that's all going to be coming through our ABI systems. Is that correct?
That is correct. In a lot more proactive way with better messaging, clearer messaging, more specific messaging.
Okay, and really quickly, somebody asked about the incremental release, and they said, is that all under one entry? And absolutely it is. If the broker or if the filer chooses to have an incremental release, then we're going to have one entry number but each release will be done at a different time. Is that correct? I just want to make sure that the questioner understands exactly how that's going to work.
That's an excellent question. I'll dig into that detail. It is one entry, and it is one release. If you select incremental release under immediate delivery procedures, the first date you get any of the cargo released, that is the release date. That's the entry date. Even though the other pieces may not arrive for 7 days, this is what you've selected so that you can get your hands on the shipment to start with. And this may be very important where you've got manufacturing go on and you need those parts as soon as they arrive. Otherwise, if you select hold all, the release date isn't the date until all the cargo has arrived, or it wheels up at least for the last part, and is eligible for release.
Go ahead.
Again, the caveat for immediate delivery is that it's only for a single entry and only for all parts of the shipment that arrive within 10 days of the first part's arrival. Meaning if it's stretching out so the last part of the shipment not arriving until day 11, on day 11, just after midnight, we issue the release for the first 3 parts, give you a message that the 4th part is not eligible for release, leaving you to file a new and separate entry for that 4th part, which saves issues with general order as well.
Right, within
the entry summary.
Let me ask you another question. This is a sort of interesting question that came across, and that is, what happens if, and maybe I don't even know if we know this yet, I hadn't contemplated this, but let's say I'm a broker and initially I request a hold all, and then I realize this is going to span over a few more days than I thought. Now I want to change my mind, and I want to ask CBP for an incremental release, even though it's all done within 10 days. Can I do that, or once I select hold all, that's it? I've got to hold all until all arrives.
Good question. You can absolutely change to incremental release. If it's 3 days in, you say, oh my gosh, the last part's not coming anytime soon, you can change to incremental release. And you'll issue a release for the first part or parts that have already arrived or eligible, and continue on as that clock ticks towards the end of the 10th day.
Okay. And right now, right this minute as we're speaking, this kind of functionality is definitely available in the air mode. Is it also available in the ocean mode?
Not available in ocean mode yet. Traditionally, splits may happen in ocean, but not often, but they can happen. The M1 system isn't really geared to take the same bill of lading and see it on 2 conveyances, but we can work towards that.
But CBP is contemplating that this functionality for both the splits and the inbond that you described are going to be available for all modes of transportation, right?
That's correct. We just don't traditionally see it in ocean. If they're going to put it on 2 vessels just by that industry, they generally give it a separate bill of lading number. It's a separate contract of carriage. But we're going to check to see how the magic would work with that manifest system. And it's most important because truck is rather tricky. Truck, we'd see it much more than we would see it in rail or ocean. And it's going into the same system.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't you start telling us now about the fun that you have planned for the cancellations then?
Sure. And back to ocean, we're up for making things work. And all my years, I've never seen things be able to be brainstormed, put on paper, and architecture built and delivered as fast as this, and it works. But I'll answer your question about other modes as in truck. You'll see at the end of the presentation. Truck is not being delivered, these advanced parts, till January, and that has to do with enhancements and migration of the truck manifest system into M1 when they're already doing the work that we need them to do, but it's not being done till later this year. Okay, corrections and cancellations. Give you time. You can look at the nice little flow charts. They are very good. But the basic is this. Sometimes you put an entry in and find that there are corrections needed. Today, it's been pen and ink change. You take it to the office. CBP will make adjustments that they have to make. And there you go. Cancellations. You never know when those are going to be worked because they're not top priority, but you need them worked well and quickly because you don't want to be responsible for the duty on two different importations, same importation, two entries. So we've taken all the facets of a cover sheet, name and address, what's the reason that you need to make a correction or the reason you need to make a cancellation, and we pull it into EDI. We've even provided for DIS, which is the Document Images System. So if you do need to submit some additional documentation, even a cover letter, that you would be able to submit that as well, and there's no timestamp copy, what happened to it, did it ever make it, did it make it back, what happened inside. This is a national view. So it becomes a permanent part of the record. So we look at the corrections. The ability for the trade to apply the correction cancellation by EDI. We've made a place for this in the implementation guide. We've made provisions for the DIS. We've updated status notifications to talk about these. And we've taken new business rules added in to process this, which you'll be very pleased with. And the cancellations, the same thing. These come up on the officer's view on his screen for entries across the top as a default cancellations and correction request for the port that that officer is working. As a matter of fact, he also has some quick counts on part of his screen to let him know how many are waiting and need to be worked. And it's not just for the one officer. It's for any officer with that role in that port. So you don't have to worry about there's only a single person who does the work and they're out all week. Someone else has the ability to see this and work it, and once they adjudicate something, you get an answer back. It's either an affirmative or a rejection of your request, and if there's a rejection, there's clear reasoning and text to let you know what you need. How about
Stephen, can I ask?
Yes, Ms. Amy?
Yeah, I just want to know, is there some kind of like a cover sheet or something that we have to send through DIS for these requests or not?
No cover sheet. It is the same DIS information. I will be covering that in another slide or two about if you do want to send in a document and how that would happen so that we connect up with your entry. But there is no cover sheet because within the transaction, you're going to have to provide us a name and a phone number, just as if you had given us your letterhead. And without that, we don't even accept your request unless we have someone to speak to about it. We even have provisions if the officer needs to send back some additional text, that it can come right through back to the filer in their response messaging. So for correction request, we have some rules about this. Remember that ACE entry can be filed way in advance of even the bill being on manifest. So we will take requests and replacements for corrections up until both arrival and release. If it's arrived but not released yet, that's fine. If it's released but not arrived, no problem. But if it's arrived and released, we have to expect that the shipment is already gone, that the admissibility decision's been made and the importer's got hold of the freight. We can work around these things, but this is the basic rule. You can only have one action on file before we'll consider the next one. So it's better than first come, first serve. You've made a request to correct something, and you send a second one, you'll be told the first one has to be worked by the officer. And if the ACE entry, the SE transaction, is up for document review or intensive exam, some sort of hold, we will hold your request in pending status until that exam or review is completed. So again, we'll look at this, that if you transmit a week before it gets manifested, and the next day it says, oh, I need to add another tariff number, you can use the R replace action, and it's done. You submitted it, CBP runs it through targeting selectivity again, no problem. Right up to the point that we've made some decision and worked your entry, we don't need to see the request. The system will accept it and reprocess. When there is a request that CBP needs to review, these are full replaces. And we have a tool for the officer that shows data element per data element next to each other and highlights the exact thing or things that have been changed so the officer can know exactly what they're approving. Or they're rejecting because perhaps they'd like to see a commercial invoice image before they do so. So this takes away a pen and ink hard copy package that the officer is trying to scroll through the system line by line, screen by screen to see where the differences are and to make a correction. Once they accept this correction request, we version out, meaning that the previous entry of record is taken aside, given a version number, and your replacement becomes the entry of record. Just to make sure everybody understands, please don't forget that if you've submitted an entry summary, you need to make sure your entry summary matches what you've just submitted. So the officer has a new interface to accept or reject. And we've got some standardized messaging that comes back out. This is part of the IG that says, okay, I've got the name, the number, there's a reason code. We'll take a look on the next page. Basically why I'm requesting this thing to happen. Suppose you're asking a cancellation request, and it's replaced not with just single entry, but now it's being replaced by an entry, an inbond, and a exportation. That indicator tells CBP one entry was only for 5 boxes when the whole original was for 100. CBP will go ahead and do what they do and look for the disposition for all 100 pieces from the original entry. DIS indicator lets the system and CBP know that there is DIS information submitted by the filer that they need to look at as well as this request. And split shipment indicator, this is just another reason that you might be correcting or canceling your entry. So what are some valid...
Wait, Stephen, can I just make a point on that last slide? Because I'm getting some questions that are coming through, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that everything that you're describing to us now are messages that are coming back and forth through ABI. And we are not talking about any type of portal functionality, ACE portal functionality. We're not saying, well, you can now request cancellations by uploading documents via the portal. This is strictly an ABI messaging set. And I'm glad that you brought out that point about the document imaging system and the filer's ability to indicate to CBP that there is a document image that's being transmitted via ABI. Did I state that correctly?
Yes, you. So let's take a look at some of the reasons that you might ask for cancellation of your entry. Clerical error happens. Entry replaced by an inbond. If you use this code, there is a reference field that you'll need to complete giving us the replacement inbond number. If there's more than one inbond, you have to fill out number 2, but you also give the indicator that there's multiple dispositions of what happened to that cargo, because CBP will not relieve the importer of liability for the first entry until all parts of the cargo for that entry have been otherwise taken care of. Okay, same for cleared on another entry number. Give us the entry number. An FTZ admission. Give it the FTZ admission number. Not all FTZ admissions today are electronic, and it may take a little extra effort, but once they more and more are electronic, we can confirm that. Merchandise cleared under informal entry. And of course, this doesn't mean type 11, formal and formal entries. This means those things like section 321, 7523, flowers accompanying the corpse. Merchandise was seized. Happens. Merchandise destroyed. Sometimes another agency requires this. Sometimes for health reasons it has to be destroyed rather than entered, and exporting is not practical. That would have been done under CBP supervision. Non-arrival. Never got on board. Shipment refused by importer. It does happen, but even when that does happen, some other disposition has to happen to that cargo before CBP will alleviate the liability for the importer. Shipment not authorized for import. This is not solely, but generally having to do with other government agencies. It's happened to all of us one time or another. CBP says fine. FDA or another agency says no, you can't sell that in this country. That is a legitimate reason for canceling your entry. And then, of course, system error. Document imaging system. CBP would like this image sent in advance, as you see here, of the submission to correction cancellation. There is a place for a filer-defined reference number that you can send in with your DIS, something as simple as your entry number plus letters, numbers is totally up to you, as long as the reference number isn't repeated for that same entry summary, throughout the life of the shipment. This will help us pinpoint exactly which document you want us to take a look at. If you send it in after you've submitted your correction or cancellation request, and there's an indicator there's DIS, but we don't see one, officers likely just to reject it and say, I need this off my desk. We don't take an incomplete package for cancellation. Or they may adjudicate your request without seeing the document. But if you file it in advance and you file this indicator saying that such a thing exists, the officer has everything they need right from the single screen to click, see your attachment, to see your request, and to adjudicate it. Different than in the past, there is no pending file. Once they decide this is accepted, it leaves their hot list. They don't see it anymore if they reject it for whatever reason. Say you've gone to the courthouse and you have a package to submit, and the clerk says, thank you, this looks great, but you didn't bring your $15 cashier's check. They hand you the whole package back and say, this is what's required. Come see me again if you'd like. The same thing happens here. So we'd like everyone to get in the habit of a number of things. One, to program to submit DIS, because this is really the heart and soul of going electronic, giving a national view, moving workloads around and shifting in cases of local or national emergencies, even power outages, giving CBP the ability to continue to process and not have to worry about that paper and did the paper have a cover sheet and did it get to the right desk. It becomes attached actually to the shipment, to the record.
And Stephen, can I mention something about that whole vision that you just set out for us? You have emphasized a number of times in your discussion that this is a paperless world. And I know that some of our members are still concerned that, let's say, terminal operators don't have the same kind of electronic visibility, for example. Like when you talked about splits. How is the terminal operator, how will we be able to prove that this portion of the shipment has been released? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, don't let it happen.
Okay.
No, it's a genuine concern because especially CFSs, many are not automated and may not intend to automate for whatever reason. And the split shipments are basically for the initial carrier filing into the country, but we know that if they have split it on multiple conveyances, one shipment may have gone into Philadelphia, one may have gone to Chicago and then ended up by truck going backwards again. That entire shipment is supposed to reach the original bill of unlading, manifested bill of unlading port, and be there with the carrier. As of today, the carrier is supposed to only move things, permit the transfer to other places in full. So for splits, I'm not sure what to say about that except the carriers are all supposed to be automated that came into the country for the manifest, and we're trying to post to the inbonds. So I'd have to think about that if we came up with a good scenario of a non-automated place, how would they get the information? And the answer may be what I'm about to tell you. Now, CBP has an interim policy that they put in writing for CFS operators who are non-automated that forget about splits, that a shipment comes in and is sent over and an ACE entry is filed, but there's no 3461. There's no signature on a customs document. And the policy says that the filer can produce and provide for that operator on their letterhead or printout of their screen showing that the shipment is properly released by customs, and that is appropriate and sufficient for the proprietor at the CFS to release the cargo.
And that's what I'm thinking when you're talking about the ABI messages that are coming back to us through ABI, is we may be able to show a printout of some kind that a portion of the shipment has in fact been released. But maybe that's for another discussion. It was a question that came through and I wanted to make sure that I addressed it.
Oh, it's a good one. So for the filer who gets this information, they're wondering, did the carrier get that partial release? Now the carrier will get their own messaging. The AMS carrier who brought it in, who manifested it, who then split the shipment, will be getting their carrier disposition for the bill saying these 20 pieces on this flight for this bill are customs released without any ambiguity.
Which is something new. That is really a good feature. I have another question while I've got you. You've already answered this, but somebody asked, or I believe you've already answered it, and that is on the cancellation codes. When you used the word informal, you were talking about a Section 321 release, for example. If we discover that the goods were in fact released under Section 321, we do have a cancellation code for that particular scenario.
Yes,
you listed it. So that has been addressed, and you did reference that in your conference. So maybe the question was phrased before you actually came up with the answer.
Could be.
I have another interesting question.
Let me clarify that.
Okay.
That when you provide that information, CBP will go look at the bill in the manifest system and they can confirm that that bill has indeed had an informal release posted against it.
Mm.
That's what they do. That's what they do today, except this is much cleaner.
You have more visibility. Let me ask you, somebody else said that they were impressed with what you've been talking about. They even referred to them as bells and whistles. But they want to know if they can enjoy some of these bells and whistles like the splits, the inbond, the correction and cancellation, if they're filing summary certified.
What a great question. No. Soon, yes. That's an excellent question, and I can tell you our system design, mad evil genius that it is, lets you certify off summary. Not yet, we're close to it, but when it does, we will actually be taking the information from the summary, forming an exact SE transaction that will be processed exactly like any others, and it becomes an entry record like any other entry record, and eligible for all the things as if you had done it separately. So we've taken certify from summary and made it as if you're sending in two forms in the same envelope. So we will process that entry, and if it's splits involved, yes, and give you the opportunity still to update and replace your entry summary as appropriate, if needed, based on the realities of your shipment.
Okay.
So let's continue on. Taking a look at these identifiers, you saw before that I said that if it's replaced with an entry number, that's the reason you're canceling it, or an inbond number or FTZ admission. It gives a place for a file-defined reference number, call it a broker reference, and file-defined DIS reference number is a possibility. But most importantly, what you should see about this is the wizardry behind that is going to take care of correcting things before it causes trouble later. If you send in an entry number as a replacement entry number, the first thing we do in the system to validate your message is we check to see if that entry number is on file. And if it's on file, is it in canceled status itself? If it is, we reject back your request and saying, sorry, not going to work. And then when you give us a good entry number, we check to see if the same bill or bills of lading on the original entry are actually on the second entry. And if the answer is no, again, we reject it back. Same for the inbound number. This is very, very common. You get the wrong number, goes to the wrong shipment, to the wrong thing, and by the time the computer considers your request, or an officer considers it, we've already hit out anything that was fat-fingered or mistyped, which saves a lot of people a lot of trouble because your response that your entry number you provided isn't on file or is in cancel status happens within seconds rather than half a day with your courier. And depending on your relationship and the size of the port, whether you get a phone call back and say, hey, Bob, do you have a different number for me? And your only obligation when it gets rejected back to you, find the right entry number and resubmit it. No harm, no foul. We want the best information and you want to provide it, everybody wins. Let's see if we can get this to go to the next slide. There we go. We discussed this again about the image. So if you and your software vendor have not considered submitting documents in this way, I have to recommend you go and get ahead of the curve. Entry Summary already does this. Entry is going to be doing it more and more. The PGAs are getting on board. This is the way that you don't have to submit an entire entry package. CBP will request, provide this invoice. I'd like to see a bill. I'd like to see the invoice on line 7. And again, that's what they want to see. That's what they review. And if you file in advance, the question comes in advance, and there's a better chance that question and answers have happened, and when the cargo arrives, you've already got the release, or an exam's already been notified to you, and you can set up the logistics. Rather than waiting for its arrival and taking 24 hours to start the process going.
And Stephen, I hate to keep asking this question, but if CBP comes back to the filer and makes a request for documents and it has attached to it an action ID number, then those documents could be uploaded via the portal, right?
I believe so.
But that's more connected with entry summary review, not ACE release.
Correct.
Okay.
Take a look at correction requests here. Let's make sure where I was. Okay. If there's a correction request and the officer decides to accept the correction, the filer will get the notification back. But if there's a rejection, they'll also get this notification back. And there are some standard reasons, and we went through and discussed across the country what these basic reasons are. And of course there are other, which means that the officer can actually type additional information as text message to the filer. Additional information required by DIS. I'd like to see a copy of an invoice. Unable to verify the disposition of the full quantity on the original entry. Again, if there are not other permits, dispositions, exports, seizures, etc., for 100% of the bill quantities on the original entry, we will not cancel that correct entry as a correction request. Okay, I'm a little confused, don't worry about me. Entries on hold. You have to resolve the correction or deletion request. Original entries on PGA hold must be resolved by PGA prior to correction or deletion request. Again, this is very important, and if you're not involved and you need to be watching out and need to be ready to program for the PG message set, that's coming fast, and the PGAs are getting on board as the way to resolve these matters and to pass information back and forth quickly with CBP. If the request is rejected, that's it. There's no pending file. That request lives on its own, and you have to submit a new request. And you can look at the implementation guide for this. Amy, is this going to be provided to the participants of this webinar?
It can be. We'll have to ask Cece how she wants to do that. I did see that you sent that over with your materials, and I'm sure that we will be able to provide that. But Cece, I'm not exactly sure what methodology you're going to use to do that, but we'll see what we can do. We'll get that out. But while I've got you, I want to just, we do have a question, and really I think somebody might be just a little confused because we're right now talking only about canceling the release of the cargo and not the entry summary. As Steve said earlier in his talk, they haven't made certified summary for release yet. That hasn't been programmed yet. So if somebody's doing certified for release and deposits duty and now wants to request a cancellation, they want to know if they're going to get a refund. Well, that's a completely different discussion. We're really just talking about the data required for the release of cargo right now.
But I can answer some of that.
Okay.
If you've got a release in your cargo, if you filed your entry summary, and it's in trade status, meaning that it goes in the CBP status once the preliminary statement is created that it's going to be on, that transfers to CBP control, and at that point, life's not quite as simple. You have to ask CBP to cancel that entry. Now, when you're doing that, you're actually asking CBP to cancel the entry summary, and we have it connected both in Legacy ACS and in ACE, that if you cancel your ACE entry summary, it will go backwards. Sorry, if CBP cancels your entry summary, it will go back and also cancel the related entry. If it's in trade control, CBP, the entry summary, the trade can go ahead and delete their entry summary and request cancellation of the entry. So we have no formal end date in the future, meaning that 30 days, 40 days, 50 days of when you can cancel an entry. But once you've paid duty and paid on statement, it's a different ballgame.
Exactly, and I think you made the point, and I just want to emphasize it. Once an entry summary appears on the prelim statement, it moves it to customs control, so the filer's ability to make changes changes.
Nice. I think we'll use that one as a message. All right, let's talk about when you can cancel. Since you can file your entry so far in advance of actual manifesting, until the bill of lading for this entry is actually on file by some carrier that submitted their manifest, you hit D and that will cancel the entry. That entry number is not going to be used again, and we change the status to canceled in our system. That's important because that gives you complete and easy control. And of course, for both cancellations and corrections, you don't have a contact name and phone number as if you had a cover sheet in real life. The system will reject it to you automatically. And this is actually a name and number who can discuss it with CBP when they call. We don't recommend putting in the name and number of your corporate licensed broker who doesn't know anything about this that's happening in Laredo, Texas. If the D action is submitted after a bill match, that's after the bill's been manifested by the carrier, it becomes a request and pops up on the CBP screen. And they will see this and they will work the request based on the details that you gave them. And as they process it, they can accept or reject. They send these results back, and know they have standard drop-down menus. They can say, I want to see a 3299 form for personal effects. That's why I'm rejecting this before I do something else. That's another type of informal entry, obviously. They can give you standard reasons for rejection, and they can also provide you text, which I have seen this in life, real in production, where the officer sends out, please contact Supervisory Entry Specialist Smith at this number to further discuss. So the officer is using this as a good tool as well for communication. So what are some of these reasons that we may reject this cancellation request? You provided the entry that's in cancel status. The other entry is in open status, meaning it could just as well be canceled any day. The inbond is in deleted status. Document that you said was going to be on DIS is not there. We need additional information by DIS before we consider your cancellation. Unable to verify. Same with admissions, deleted or open. If the original entry is on hold, the hold has to be resolved prior to processing one of these requests. Same with PGA. The PGA hold has to be resolved first because it's associated with that first entry. And then there's other, which allows formal text to be typed out by the officer. And if they don't contain the same bill number, or the inbonds don't contain the same bill number. And I don't remember if I discussed that, but I'll discuss that now. Back when we were talking about inbond, If you provide an inbound on an entry, we check to see it's on file, we check to see if it is active, and we check to see if the same bill as on the entry is on file in that inbound. And then we go further when it comes down to release. If you have an inbound moving it to port A to port B for 99 pieces, and you're making entry for 105, we will send you a message and say, thank you so much, but we can't release this because there's not evidence that all 105 pieces have permission to be in port B. And of course, the replacement transaction you declared is not on file. All of these are handled by the computer looking at data to give you immediate feedback so that you can make a correction and get it right back in, saving a lot of time and money. I can't save you all the frustration, just time and money. Once a transaction, an entry is canceled, that entry number cannot be reused. Not in ACS, not in ACE, not in an entry summary. That's new, and it seems to fit with the way brokers handle work. Something that's a week and a half old that they gave out their file number. They're not desperate, as far as I know, to recycle that entry number out of sequence. Okay, if the request is rejected, that's it. It's not in a pending stack at CBP. It's up to the filer to take further actions if they wish. Shall we take some questions first?
Well, we just have a couple because I've been trying to catch them as we've been going along. But one person wanted to know if the simplified entry, or SE, I know I'm trying to get away from saying simplified entry because we really want to be talking about ACE release. She wants to know, or he wants to know, if the transmission of ACE release is really the transmission of the 3461 information. And, you know, Stephen, as you know, actually with ACE release, we can transmit a little bit fewer data fields and secure the release of cargo than we did on a full 3461, right?
So the fewer data fields really have to do with manifest, that in ACE entry or ACE cargo release, you do not need to give me the flight number or the flight date or the arrival date, or in ocean, the voyage number and the vessel name or the arrival date of the merchandise. The importer broker is declaring these are the conditions and merchandise that I'm importing, giving the bill number or the house bill number with the master bill number. We go out and we check the carrier and get that information, and if necessary, derive the port of entry. This is important in shipments where sometimes there's a flyover, which is defined as it couldn't land at the first port and everything landed and offloaded at a second port. If you've got your broker permit in multiple ports, and even if it landed at the first port and then you sent inbound to the second, gives a lot of flexibility without having to depend on the processing of that entry based on arrival date or based on the broker getting the information correct about the manifest in his submission of an entry.
Okay. Well, that's really, I mean, there are a couple of other questions, but I think we caught them. So why don't we move on, give us a glimpse of what's coming next, and then we can wrap it up.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So we move back a little bit. I'm not really checking the time. Can you tell me how we're doing?
Well, we're kind of, you know, we've been an hour and 15 minutes, and I think it tries people's patience to go too long.
Okay.
Even though I find this riveting, I'm not sure everybody else does.
Well, I appreciate everyone who used their mute button. We did recently have something a little more exclusive in a webinar and call, and someone fell asleep and was snoring. And that was tough because we couldn't disconnect them. And I know they didn't do it on purpose.
We automatically muted everybody so that wouldn't happen on this call.
So I just want to send a quick shout out to my buddy I spoke to Friday afternoon. You know who I'm talking about. I hope you're awake. So let's talk about what's coming next. Unified entry and importer security filing. Not many people do this today. It's available in ACS, in the HI transaction, in one envelope, one transmission to send your importer security filing and your entry. But remember, importer security filing is only for ocean and is required itself to be filed no later than 24 hours prior to loading of the vessel. And that's not always practical, can be done. You can send your entry today in ACS. I think it's either 60 or 90 days in advance, and CBP will do nothing with it. But if you do send it, they would take the security filing off and process that through the regular importer security filing processes. But when we come to the ACE entry, you now can file 2 weeks in advance if you'd like, and we're processing your entry. We're not waiting till it's 5 days out or it's wheels up. So you can send that in one package. So who's eligible to file? Customs brokers or importers who are self-filers. Because this is entry, obviously those are the same requirements. Now, how do you manage this? Do we have a new set of code, or people can get frustrated? What if they don't update their code to do both? We've made this process so if you would like to file importer security filing with your entry, all you have to do is include the additional records instead of SE record 10, 20, 30, 40. If there's an SF, as in San Francisco, 10, which is the first record of importer security filing, our system will detect that and take it as if you would file two forms in the same envelope, pull importer security filing, and file that with the importer security filing programming as if you would file directly, give you responses directly with nothing in between, and they'll take the entry part and create an entry record and communicate with you as an entry filer about the entry. Separate responses, but the advantages of filing this together, and we'll quote or paraphrase my friend Amy Magnus, is allows the broker, filer, or importer doing this on the importer's behalf to know that they have transmitted the same information, say about tariff number and bill number and country of origin on both filings. Could you file it separately? Certainly. Could you file it together? Yes, we make it available. And at some point you'll be able to certify off summary for both cargo release and importer security filing in the same processes. In each of those processes, yes ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you said it, and I'm going to reemphasize because there is a question. If you combine the ISF filing with the release data, it is customs business and must be done by a broker or self-filer. Stephen said that, but I want to just emphasize
Absolutely.
it. But it doesn't mean that you have to use this option. If you still want to have, let's say, an overseas freight forwarder do your ISF, that's certainly your option.
Absolutely, positively. And I will tell you, audience, we have run the stats. I have reviewed the statistics, and brokers are overwhelmingly doing the filing of importer security filings. And it may be, separate parts of the brokerage office, but it seems like this is an opportunity. Doesn't have to be, because when you actually submit this and becomes an ISF record, it becomes an entry record, you have more possibilities. You could use a unified transaction to update both. You could use a separate transaction to update entry, separate transaction to update importer security filing. Once those records are there, you treat them as if you had filed them separately, but we also give you the possibility of doing a unified update. And we're looking at moving this into production in July.
And can I just ask you, do you have to have a continuous bond to file the simplified, the SE or the ACE release?
At this point, the answer is yes, because we do not have an electronic single transaction bond, and as everyone knows, the single transaction bond today is paper.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
we have something very exciting coming up. I've been pushing this myself. I have others who also have been wanting this, an electronic single transaction bond filed by the surety on behalf of the importer. Just what they do today, the broker communicates with surety, gets approval for the bond, and actually the surety will be putting on a file with CBP. And when you file your entry, it will match up this importer, this entry, this bond, this amount, and you're done. For all the reasons that entries and entry summaries have had to be docs required only because of the single transaction bond, that would go away. And this is not a pipe dream. This is actually being coded and worked on right now. Stunned silence from the crowd. I understand it's very exciting.
Well, that's a whole topic for another webinar, so let's see. Continue on with telling us what's next, because it is very exciting.
Diversion incident. This isn't really the diversion of the conveyance. It's actually the diversion of that bill of lading that was meant for Port A and is now cannot be offloaded at Port A. And this, we've had, unfortunately, some big occasions for this in the last decade. We had Katrina. We had Sandy in New York. We've had some port strikes that were serious, and most recently we had some oil spill in the Galveston, Houston area that this was perfect for. So what happens today when you filed all these entries in advance and the day or 2 days before that vessel can't call Port A and that merchandise is now going to be offloaded to Port B? What happens today without all this electronic cancellation possibility is a lot of manual cancellations right after you had to refile at another port and then make arrangements to do inbonds to go to someplace else. A lot of work. Work this out with the approval of rulings and regulations because it fits under the exigent circumstances that if you have already filed your entry before the vessel decides to divert to the other port with your cargo, you can take no action if you wish. Leave that port of entry, Port A, entry summary, and statement, and we will engage business rules as exceptions that that merchandise offloaded in Port B, and like the old paired system, if anyone remembers that, there is no inbond involved in the transaction. And this saves untold amount of money, time, and effort, and allows the carriers and the brokers to worry about getting that cargo where it needs to be. Allows CBP and the other government agencies to focus on security and whatever needs to happen in Port A, and the carrier to worry about the overload of logistics and equipment that Port B they weren't expecting. So what happens to inbonds? If inbonds are already cut from Port A to Port D, the filer gets a notice that your inbond is no longer effective because that bill is no longer coming to Port A. If an FTZ admission, well, that's to a very specific location in your Port A, is that what you're filing? You've already got the electronic ability to to delete and refile that admission with an inbond now, if that's where you still want to bring the cargo. You still have the option of canceling your entry summary and your entry in port A and refiling in another port. So we've taken all these electronic tools, and most importantly, we're making an exception that Rulings and Regulations is ready to write regulations for a permanent exception when this happens. It's the carrier who reports to CBP that my vessel can no longer dock in port A due to national emergency, refinery fire, weather, whatever that could be, and CBP will decide to implement this diversion incident process for all eligible entries and entry summaries. And it doesn't matter if the bills of lading get off in port B, port C, port D, along the coast. Wherever it happens, we'd be able to invoke this.
And when you're talking about this, you're talking for any mode of transportation. If
Yes.
there is a diversion required because of the type of emergency that you've just described, it won't matter whether it's rail or truck or vessel or air.
That's correct. We're starting with vessel, but those along the border would be familiar with crossings that end up underwater for 3 weeks because of flooding. That's certainly not the fault of the carrier. Air would be similar, but it's not for any time a flight's late or the airport's fogged in. That policy hasn't been quite worked out yet, but there are times when the entire airport is shut down, and not for a few hours.
Well, we need to wrap it up, so let's do our last slide. And
all right, what's next? We've got Ocean, which is about to roll out for Simple Ocean. That means no inbonds, no PGAs, no partials, no splits. And we're still testing to make sure there are no issues with more than one bill or inbonds rolling to the right port of entry. And most interesting, we've discovered recently that when we don't require this port of entry and we try to derive it from port of unlading, more code and more magic is needed. There are certain ports that are only ports of unlading that entries are not filed. 1402 is Newport News. All vessels who dock there, their entries are actually filed in 1401. The same with Long Beach. Entries are not filed in 2709 for Long Beach, but anything that docks there, entries are 2704. So we've written code to derive that appropriately. And as we continue on to make life easier, advanced truck, the same thing. There are things that truck doesn't do today which are beyond the scope of this call, having to do with boarded quantities and how inbonds are related, that truck is working on right now, the enhancements. They already have it on their schedule to work by the end of the year so that we'd be able to test and move forth. I'm sorry we don't have time to cover a little more about what's rolling out soon, but on our webpage and through the NCBFAA, you can find the upcoming schedule for deployment of not only working these things in 2-week and 3-month increments, but when we plan to deploy these functionalities out, looking towards turning off ACS for cargo release and summary, and also for collections in a very short time period. Amy?
I'll tell you what, Stephen, I'm certain that you are going to be asked to come back by popular demand. You have given us a great deal of information on this call, and I think it's going to take a while for us all to digest it because there's so many new things coming out with the rapid deployment that CBP has initiated through their agile development. I also want to put in a plug for a webinar that we're planning, the NCBFAA is planning with CBP in partnership, again, that's going to be particularly targeted for filers, for brokers and filers on the async summary process. We're going to try to roll up our sleeves and get down in the weeds a little bit. And some of the information that you've given us today, Stephen, is going to help on that webinar too. So be on the lookout for that to be, it's going to be mid-July, I think is about when we're going to record it. I want to apologize for the fiasco at the beginning of this call, so hopefully you can all just get over that piece and really just, you know, focus on what we provided you. And if you have questions that we didn't answer, and I know you did, we'll try to get answers to them. And if you have other questions, you can always email me, and it's amagnus@andaringer.com, and I can make sure that the answers will get to you from Stephen or go ahead.
I'd like to put in a plug for NCBFAA.
Thank you.
They are incredible partners in this process, and please, please use this conduit into CBP. And when I say up to headquarters, I mean beyond up to headquarters. It doesn't go in someone's nice little comment in basket. I have many years of experience in the systems, and I can tell you that I've never experienced anything like this, where I can have a suggestion on Monday, and I have that in a working model by Monday afternoon or Tuesday, and an architecture design, so we think we're going to put this in, that's a great idea. So your questions are important. The more you know, the more you can challenge and ask more questions. Bells and whistles? Certainly. It's an automated world, and we need to do more with less. So we have more data to process, and NCBFAA has got an opportunity like never before for you personally to have your suggestions driven right down to the people who are building it.